I wrote Breathe really at the request initially of my wife. She'd said to me, look, you're always writing these horrible, scary, dark fantasy stories. If you're going to do that, why don't you write a proper, scary story for a change? Which for her meant simply a ghost story. And I used to go around schools, and still do, teaching workshops and so on. And one of the questions I began to ask is can you name me a genuinely scary novel aimed at teenagers that's a ghost story? And hardly anybody could. Most of the really great ghost novels written for teenagers were really written in the 70s and the 80s actually, some of them in the 19th century. And it occurred to me that I could do something maybe along these lines. So I waited for an idea to occur to me, and it didn't. And then eventually I saw this image in my mind of a girl sitting up against a window, and she was very close to me, and she was very still. And she had long dark hair, I remember, and she just kept on looking out of this window. And I didn't know why. And I thought, well, why could this be? My first thought was that maybe she's imprisoned in this room. Maybe she's a prisoner, and therefore there's nothing to do, so she looks out of the window. But then a much darker thought occurred to me, really, and this is really what turned it into the story it was. I thought, no, she's not imprisoned. She's ill, she's sick, and therefore she either lies in bed looking at the walls and the ceiling, or maybe her mum picks her up and puts her in a chair by the window and props her up with some cushions and some pillows, and she looks out of the window. There's not much to see out there, it's just the countryside, but at least she sees the autumn change to winter, winter change to spring. There's something to do. And I constructed a story around this girl, this teenage girl, Isabella, and her mother, and something really frightening that happens between them about 200 years ago. At the end of that, the mother herself, is so guilty about what happens that when she dies in the house, her spirit refuses to leave it. She stays there. And for 200 years after that, families come and go in the house. Nobody can ever see her. She's a ghost. Except one day, in our time, Jack, this boy, turns up. And Jack has always had a gift for sensing the presence of the dead, especially if somebody died quite close to where he is and quite recently. And when he turns up at this house, the feelings he has are absolutely electrifying. And on the first morning he's there, he wakes up, and there she is, the ghost mother. And at first they're terrified. She's never seen anybody see her before, and they move apart, and then they come back together, and she starts to tell him all about her lovely daughter Isabella. But she doesn't tell him the truth. And when Jack finds out that she's lying not just about that, but about the fact that there are 3 other ghosts in this house, all of children of different ages, and what she's been doing to these children, then he realises not just is he in danger, but his mother's in serious danger as well. And it really becomes a thriller from that moment onwards about whether or not he can possibly get out alive.